My name is Dr. Karen Brieg. I'm a past president of the Federation of Medical Women of Canada, or FMWC, and I'm a co-chair of the Federation's Women, Peace and Security, or WPS committee. And with that, I'd like to welcome you. What is our third quarterly fireside chat about women, peace, and security issues? Tonight, we are very pleased to have Erin Hunt, the Executive Director from Minds Action Canada, or MAC. Erin is a longtime member of the Women, Peace and Security Network and will be sharing with us tonight a bit about who she is, what MAC does, how her organization got involved with the Women, Peace and Security Network Canada, and how anyone participating today or listening to the recording can get more involved in these topics, including with MAC. This being one of many different examples of I think we're up to 80 different groups and partners that are part of this network. So the purpose of these meetings is to help you get to know a little bit about some of the other partners and the other opportunities when you get involved with the Women, Peace and Security Network. Before we get ahead of ourselves too much, I just wanted to acknowledge that many, but not all of us, are participating today from Ottawa, the land on which Ottawa is based, being traditional and unceded territory of the Algonquin Nation. We encourage everyone to take a moment to reflect on the history of whose land they are working, living, and playing on today. And feel free to share your own land acknowledgements in your chat. Similar to our previous sessions, we will have a Q&A section live at the end of our fireside chat after the recording is finished. It's one of the many perks of coming to an event live so that you can have your questions answered by our guest speaker. Part of our aspirations of why we are doing these chats is to make them open and available to anyone to be participating in and or to listening to. So not knowing who it is that's listening to this recording, let me just take a minute to offer you some context. If you are already a Federation member, but you're not a Women, Peace and Security member, please consider writing into the Federation's main office and asking to join the Women, Peace and Security Committee. If you are a Canadian woman physician or medical learner, but you're not a Federation member, please consider going to the website, fmwc.ca, and signing up to become a member. If you're a Canadian, but you're not a physician, but you still care about women's health and women physician in leadership roles, please also come and check the Federation's website. There is an opportunity to still become a member, and it's called an associate member. If you are not Canadian, but you still care deeply about women's health and supporting women's physicians, please consider checking out the MWIA.net, Medical Women International Association. And for everyone listening, I would be remiss to not do one shameless plug specifically to let you know that this is the 100th anniversary of the Federation of Medical Women of Canada. We encourage you to consider joining us on September 26th to 28th at the Fairmont Chateau Laurier in Ottawa. Everyone is welcome. More information is available on the Federation's website. So that's a bit of a background about the Federation. One of the main activities the Federation's Women, Peace and Security Committee does is work together with the Women, Peace and Security Network. So we've had the honor now to speak already with the ex-chair of the committee, Beth Warniak. That was our first talk. And our last talk was with Zoe Dougal from Canadem. So if you have not seen those previous videos, I encourage you to go back to the website and listen to other previously taped fireside chats. With that background in place, we are now ready to move on to our main act, the fireside chat. And I would like to pass everything over now to my co-chair of the Federation Women, Peace and Security Committee, Anne Niec, to introduce herself and her exciting guests for today. Anne.
Thank you very much, Karen. Such a pleasure being here tonight. And we should all be excited because it's my pleasure to introduce and to follow up and have an opportunity to have a conversation with Erin Hunt. And so I am one of the members of the Federation, a past president of the Federation of Medical Women of Canada. And this has been one of the most exciting adventures of having this opportunity to actually interview individuals who have such an impressive mark on our country and actually on people's lives. And Erin, you're one of these fascinating people. So give us in a nutshell a little bit about who is Erin Hunt.
Uh, Thanks, Anne. Well, first of all, thanks. Erin Hunt is very appreciative of being here and happy to help you celebrate your 100th anniversary this year. I am, I guess in the shortest way is I'm a humanitarian disarmament campaigner. So I have a background in political science and human security and peace building degrees, and I've done some work in child welfare in Canada, as well as youth peace building in a post-conflict situation in Uganda. But now I'm the executive director of Minds Action Canada, working on what we call humanitarian disarmament. So we work on these big global campaigns on specific weapons, where we look at what weapons do to people and the environment, and then we campaign, do advocacy, lobby, research, come up with new ideas, and really push governments to take action on those specific weapons. So we work on landmines, which are small explosives that you can find in the ground, cluster munitions, which is like a big bomb with a whole bunch of little bombs inside it that open up in the air and spread all those little bombs over an area about the size of a football field. We also work on reducing the bombing and shelling of cities and towns. We work on nuclear weapons, and we work on autonomous weapon systems, which hopefully your fellow physicians around the world haven't had to deal with yet. And if we do our jobs right, nobody will. So yeah, I take this what we call humanitarian disarmament approach to these issues, because a lot of the pre-1990s conversations about weapons have been really about like, who has how many stockpiles, and you know, what is the blast radius of this and that, and when we switched to talking about what weapons do to people, you didn't have to have this like PhD in strategic studies to have an important role. So like, yeah, I'm a political scientist and my master's degree is in human security and peace building. I work with actually a lot of physicians and medical personnel, because you don't need to know like details about the weapon, but you know what the weapons do to people, and you know when they're causing unnecessary suffering. So it's really great to be here and talking with all of you, because without medical knowledge, it's really hard to know what weapons shouldn't be used.
So, wow, there's so much to unpack, Erin, from what you
Sorry,
said.
I know it's a lot.
Yeah. And your passion is palpable about this topic. And so, how did you get invested so much and so passionate about this topic?
Okay, it's kind of an embarrassing story, which I think your student members might appreciate. When I was in my undergrad degree, like 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 2 decades ago, apparently now. I don't know how that happened, but someone came to a class and was like, "Oh, the Canadian Red Cross is looking for volunteers to talk about these 3 topics." And I thought children affected by armed conflict would be interesting. So I, signed up, went to the training, and somehow got my weekends mixed up and showed up for the landmines training. And was not confident enough to walk out of that weekend long training. So I did it. And by the end of the first day, I realized that this issue, like I started with anti-personnel landmines. We already had a treaty that Canada had led that banned them. So it was just a process of, clearing out the landmines that are in the ground now, never using more of them, and helping the victims. And I was like, this is a global problem we can actually fix. We know what we need to do. We can win on this, and man, do I love to win. So that's how I got involved. I was doing advocacy as like an undergraduate student. I went and did an international internship, and I worked in Uganda, with landmine survivors and making sure they get the services they need, whether it's helping connect them to the Ugandan health system or like other survivors for psychosocial support through peer support, or ways to start making money again, because if you lost a limb and you're living in a subsistence farming community, it might be hard to make money again and you need a new skill. Then I tried to have a normal job and went and worked in child welfare. But a couple years later, an opportunity to do more youth work with Mines Action Canada came up. And I decided to move across the country for a 3-month job. And I've been there ever since, except for I got to move home during the pandemic. So I can now do my job from British Columbia instead of Ottawa.
Wow, wow.
It's one of those issues where you can actually see the fix you're doing. And I work with great people. So
Yeah, that makes
it's
a
wonderful,
difference, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It's a huge difference. So you talk about this human, you said
Disarmament.
disarmament.
Yeah.
So what exactly does that mean?
Yeah, so like I said, like at some points, disarmament like has been this like old boys club where you be like, okay, your country has 6,000 intercontinental missiles and our country has 8,000. You know what? Let's each have 5,000, and we're going to call that a win for humanity. But what humanitarian disarmament does is it actually sort of is a Canadian idea. It sort of came out of some of the work that our former foreign minister in the mid to late 1990s, Lloyd Axworthy, did, where there was campaigners from around the world, landmine survivors, the doctors that were assisting them in refugee camps and seeing what landmines do to people's bodies, human rights activists, development folks. They had been campaigning for a couple of years that, you know, landmines, because they sit in the ground forever, they don't know if you're a soldier or if you're a kid going to school, and then it means you can't farm the land. Like, it has all these other impacts. So they were saying these weapons need to be banned. And then Canada listened, and Canada had a conference in 1996, and at the end of it, Lloyd Axworthy did what diplomats never do and surprised people. Like, diplomats are not supposed to be giving out surprises. They do what they're told, and everything is usually agreed before you show up. But he surprised everyone on the last day and was like, okay, everybody come back to Ottawa in a year to sign the treaty. Go negotiate. And what they did with the negotiations was civil society. So, you know, doctors that have been working in refugee camps, survivors themselves, activists from around the world. We were in the room with the diplomats and the governments and the UN. And we knew that survivors have the most important view on this. They're the ones who know what these weapons do. So when you think about humanitarian disarmament, we think about this partnership of civil society working with like-minded states, where we all have a say in the weapons that our humanity has decided are just not acceptable. So we look at what the weapons do to people, and we looked at landmines and saw that, you know, 80 to 90% of the casualties were civilians, people who weren't fighting. Even like long after the wars were done, when we looked at cluster munitions, we saw that some, like, the casualties were well over 90% civilians. When you talk about bombing of cities and towns, we're looking at 80 to 90% people not fighting, getting hurt and killed and injured. And then you see the infrastructure get destroyed. So I work with a lot of actually physicians on that issue, because, for example, one of our colleagues is a Syrian doctor who stayed in Aleppo during the siege, and his hospital was destroyed, but he was working out of like underground makeshift hospitals and able to share that experience and being like, this is what hurt our community, and bring that to the global stage. So yeah, humanitarian disarmament is, we look at what the weapons do to people. I have friends who work on the environmental impact too, because conflict does bad things to the environment. And then it means that any of us, if you can see the damage and you don't like it, you can take action. And you can, from your own personal experience, whether it is as a physician or a teacher, and you see the impact on children in schools, like everybody has expertise in this.
Yeah. How big of a problem are landmines? Like you said, this started, this
Yeah.
treaty was in the 1990s. So from then to now, how big of a problem? Are we moving in the right direction? Like what's happening?
Like I said, I love to win, and we are actually winning. So when the world signed the Ottawa Treaty banning landmines, the global estimate was about 20,000 people killed and injured every year by landmines. Around 2010, 2011, 2012, we were getting that number down to about 13, or sorry, not 13, 3,000 or less. Some of the recent conflicts in Syria and Iraq with ISIS and with Ukraine, the conflict in Ukraine, have seen those numbers creep back up. But we actually, as civil society, we put out, as part of the international campaign to ban landmines, we put out this report every year that's called the Landmine Monitor. So if you're interested in knowing about any country in the world and the landmine situation, or globally, you can go to themonitor.org, and like I usually have the number memorized, but I've been very busy today and it has completely gone out of my mind. So there were 4,700 casualties in 2022. So from over 20,000 a year to 25, 26 years later, down to 4,700. I mean, we're
huge.
winning.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And so it sounds like this continues to be used as a means of destruction and war.
Yeah, the landmines, actually, this is somewhere where we're winning even better. There's only about 2 governments in the world that still use landmines, Russia and Myanmar. The only people that are really using landmines are non-state armed groups. So like you might think of them as like rebel armies or that sort of thing. So a big use, which is why we saw a spike in the mid 2010s, was ISIS in Iraq and Syria. They started making their own. But there's almost no factory-made landmines being manufactured anywhere.
Wow.
There's only a couple countries that still make them at all and keep them in in warehouses. The vast majority of the planet, 164 countries have joined the Ottawa Treaty.
Wow.
So they will never use them again. And most of those destroyed all the ones they had in their stockpiles. So they went and emptied out their warehouses and either took them all apart or they stuck them in a big hole and blew them up. So millions of mines have been destroyed before we ever have to find them. But it takes a while to find the mines in the ground. And so
I wondered about that.
Yeah.
Yeah. How do you know where these mines are?
So I come from the victim assistance side of the world, and the advocacy side, which is probably where most of you guys, if you are passionate about this, will probably end up. But there is survey and clearance experts, and I'll give you sort of the Erin's version of survey and clearance.
Sure.
So they have multiple steps. Often they do what's called a non-technical survey. So they'll go talk to people. They'll look at records from conflicts. You're supposed to, before landmines were banned by the Ottawa Treaty, you were supposed to there were some rules that you had to make a map about where you put them and all that sort of stuff. Banning them's better. But you can look at the maps, you can look at where there were battles, where there might have been camps and things, where people have had incidents with mines where people have been killed or injured. And you go talk to the communities. So a lot of my friends who like our demining organization friends, they hire locally in the community. They train them how to go out and talk to their neighbors. They, the next village over, there are other people in their country, and gather information. And then they do some like technical survey, which is where I get a little bit iffy on the specifics on it. But they might use like dogs who can smell explosives and other machinery and that sort of thing. And then they go through an area that they confirm is dangerous. And they go through it pretty much centimeter by centimeter until it's cleared.
Wow.
So then they can return the land back to the community, whether it's for farming or playgrounds or soccer fields. Usually, if they're handing land back to the community, they often make sure a soccer game happens so that everybody knows that the land is safe.
Wow.
Yeah.
And isn't, that's a lovely story of, and you're right, of something that can be done and has a huge impact on a whole community's life,
Yeah.
right? Whole community. Because we're not getting any more land, but we're actually getting more land this way. We're recovering the land in a safe way. Wow.
Yeah.
And so you're part of this whole network.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about how that relationship comes about
Yeah.
and what you get out of it.
Oh, we get to talk to awesome people across the country. It's like just like right now. Yeah, so we joined the Women, Peace and Security Network, I think, for a few reasons. One is the original UN Security Council resolution that sort of brought about the Women, Peace and Security agenda does talk about landmine clearance in it. So it's always been a little bit in the back of the work we do. But like I said, we're not clearance people. One of the things we do though is a lot of youth engagement, and especially with young women. Young people are often the ones out there clearing the mines, teaching communities what dangerous objects look like and how to try and stay safe until the mines are clear, or talking to people about what's like doing the survey part of things. So a big part of our work is to help those people who are maybe they're doing advocacy and trying to get their country to ban landmines, or helping with victim assistance and doing rehabilitation, or supporting survivors, teaching them how to go to the decision makers. Because, like the UN's not exactly built for, well, women. And then it's definitely not built for younger people who English is maybe not their first language. Maybe they don't speak French either. And it's a weird, intimidating space. So we do a lot of work with young people on making sure that their views are heard. So that really fits in with the Women, Peace and Security Network work on participation. And honestly, I mean, I'm executive director now, but I've had a whole bunch of other job titles, but disarmament it's a little male dominated. So I feel like this group in particular probably understands what it's like to work in that sort of male dominated sphere, and all the fun, I'd say, that comes with that.
Challenges and
Challenges. If we have time, I've got a fun story about that. But so being part of the network and being connected to other people across Canada who might not work on disarmament, but they work on peace and security, and they do it from this women's lens, has been really uplifting. And then we get to learn about all the other areas of peace and security and all the work that different people are doing, and they get to learn a bit about disarmament. And so I feel like it's a very nice exchange. So that might not be quite why we joined, but it's definitely why we stuck around.
you bring up some very important aspects that always seem to resonate as well. Women's role in leadership. And, we have a lot of women leaders in our fields, and we also have a lot of women learners, right?
Yeah.
And so the lessons of leadership, I mean, honestly, you're a wonderful example of a woman taking leadership in something that I would imagine was very male dominant. You're talking to, you're negotiating with country leaders, and you're talking about war, which for the most part is predominantly male oriented, right? So tell me a little bit about what are lessons learned in this woman leadership role?
Oh, I think one of the biggest lessons I've actually learned is because, like I said, I came from the victim assistance side and the advocacy side. A lot of the women that were there before me, what was really amazing about them is they didn't have to conform to sort of the more masculine leadership style. So I'm thinking of, for example, Jody Williams, who led the international campaign to ban landmines through the negotiations and and to get the Nobel Peace Prize and everything. Jody is just Jody. Like Jody does not change herself that much into another model, and I have like women from Herna from Nepal and Margaret from Uganda. They are like, Perna wears her sari everywhere and is like the quintessential Nepali woman, but she's also the loudest voice for disarmament in her country. So I got to watch them be leaders in their own way without sort of getting swayed too much by this old boys club. And there's still an old boys club, but now I've been around long enough that I can now get away with some stuff. So I think, having mentors and I know that's a real big privilege for a lot of women, is to be able to take on a leadership role without having to conform.
Yeah.
And it's really a privilege now that I get to be that outside of the box leader a little bit for women coming 5, 10, 15 years behind me. So like, I wear floral dresses to talk about weapons all the time, just as like a little, but then again, I've also had situations where I've got called on as like the young lady in black, when I'm me, and the undergraduate student asking the question after me got called sir. And I had to go have a little chat with the government official afterwards that maybe we shouldn't be calling women in their 30s who have been working in the field for 8 years young lady. Or, there's a group of men that they literally wear dinosaur pins so you can identify them as part of the old boys club who have been working on landmines for 20 years. And they hand them out to each other. I don't know. And I've been working on the issue for 20 years now, and somebody was explaining this to me for the upteenth time, and I sort of just was like, I'm actually interested about that. I started doing advocacy in 2003, and it's 2023 now. So does that mean I get the dinosaur pin? Not that I'd want to wear a symbol of like something that couldn't adapt and died, but anyways. And the man turned, he was like, well, have you blown anything up? No, victim assistance, advocacy, blah, blah, blah. He's like, okay, well, maybe we'll get you a pink pin then, a pink dinosaur. I was like,
so these are the challenges, it seems like, in all fields.
yes.
All fields.
I will be bringing pink dinosaurs next time I go to that specific meeting and hand out some nice bright neon pink lapel pins for fun.
Yeah, so gender issues are alive and well. And then we
Yeah.
also have, right, and recognizing all, the dimensions of gender and how that
Yeah.
plays out, right, as well. And then I
Yeah.
also, I'm impressed because you talk about how that relationship, because you're doing the advocacy work and the relationship with medicine, right? And I'd like to hear a little bit more about that relationship, advocacy and medicine, and how medicine fits in, because absolutely the story you said of the physician who, is addressing the victims who are coming in. Absolutely, I see that.
Mhm.
I can see that role of healing those who have been impacted, right? And I can't even imagine the various parts of the body or the impacts. Like, I just can't even imagine how horrific that can be.
Yeah.
But I also wonder about, how advocacy plays in there as a physician.
Mm.
Also, are there other roles that physicians play?
Yeah. There are a lot of physicians in my line of work, to the point where, occasionally if you're not feeling well at a meeting, you just literally have to go be like, hey, did I eat something bad or am I actually sick? Like, type situation. So I think the advocacy for physicians comes in a few ways. One is preventive.
Hmm.
So, there are a lot of physicians who do a lot of work on nuclear weapons, because if a nuclear weapon is ever going to be used again, it's going to be all of you that have to respond. But what we saw from Hiroshima and Nagasaki is that huge numbers of medical facilities, medical personnel were killed and injured, and then those who were still alive and still able to practice were overwhelmed. And we know that we've done studies that hasn't changed. So there's International Physicians for Prevention of Nuclear War, and the Canadian chapter, which is Physicians for Global Survival, do a lot of work on like trying to get governments to take nuclear disarmament seriously, because they what your own capacity is, and what you could handle. And we've done some, the International Campaign to Abolish Nuclear Weapons did a study of a few cities. We actually did Ottawa in Mines Action Canada and looked at what would happen to the sort of medical system if Ottawa was hit with a nuclear weapon. So there's this role that physicians can play in advocacy of like, listen, you have the power to not put us in that situation. You need to take action. Don't do that to us. Don't risk doing that to us. Don't risk doing that to our peers in other countries. And like there's also this sort of role of we know, like you say, you can't really imagine, but I think like in the back of your head, though, you can sort of imagine what sort of, or what you would need to be able to deal with something like a landmine blast injury, and that role of, wanting that, Canada with our international assistance to be able to provide some of that support. So it's not you, but it's your peer in Angola that's going to have to deal with that, and you want them to be sort of able to address that. And you don't want to see hospitals being bombed, as we see a lot of physicians around the world speaking out on this. Of one of the key parts of international law is that medical personnel are protected.
Hmm.
And when you see other medical personnel not being protected, a lot of there's advocacy there. But yeah, I think one of the interesting areas that I've recently seen some physicians getting involved with is a project that's coming from the UN Mine Action Service and the University of Washington, where Dr. Hannah Wild, who's a resident surgeon in University of Washington system. I have her like actual job title somewhere, but Hannah's great. And she's working with other medical personnel around the world on helping to improve trauma care in low resource situations. Because what we've found is that if someone is in a rural area and they step on a landmine, the mine might not kill them. Most landmines aren't designed to kill. They're designed to maim, because then that is a greater burden on the opposing force. So the mines might not be designed to kill, but if it's going to take you 10 hours to get to assistance and you're bleeding and you're like, that's what brings up the mortality rate is not getting sort of the gaps in the critical care. So she's got this really interesting project going on that if there's any students watching that want, I know she has opportunities for students occasionally to like help with the project a bit. So some of it might be, filing and data, but some of it's like writing and publishing, which is always cool when you're a student, right?
Oh, absolutely. All of that's cool.
Yeah. So, yeah, trying to do things of like, okay, how can we assist communities to fill those gaps? To what do communities like? Do we need training being added to risk education? Like, how are we gonna try and make sure people survive long enough so that the trained professionals can help them? So like there's a lot of interesting research and ways that you can contribute to this. There's projects out of blanking on the university right now, but maybe I'll email Karen this to go out with the video. But on like blast injuries, and especially because children are small.
Yeah.
So blast injuries on children is a whole different ballgame than a blast injury on an adult. So Save the Children and some academics and some real world practitioners have been working on resources on how to treat blast injuries, and like especially for children. So within the disarmament sphere, there's a lot of different ways that physicians can get involved, and it doesn't necessarily have to be MSF or humanity and inclusion and doing that overseas frontline medicine. There's so many ways that you can have an impact even from your couch.
Wow. That's really, really helpful for our members, because I think that many people would be very invested in thinking about, especially when you can see something materialize in a short period of time, right? Or over time, but very invested in, at the end of the day, this has a major impact on health and well-being, right? And so, and you've outlined very lovely ways of advocacy in that our members can consider. And so if they want to get involved in your organization, what would they have to do?
Send me a note. Yeah, just as you can see, I think on the screen, my name's Erin, E-R-I-N, and then it's at minesactioncanada.org. It's all one word. There's also, you can donate to like us for our advocacy and research. You could also donate to, for example, Humanity and Inclusion, which is Canada, which is based out of Montreal, and they're a disability rights organization that was founded by French doctors who were working in Cambodian refugee camps and seeing the landmine injuries daily in the 1980s. And now they do sort of rehabilitation and programming for persons with disabilities all over the world, and trying to prevent acquired disability and provide services for people who are born with disabilities or who acquire them. And like a couple easy ones is there's a Don't Bank on the Bomb report if you really just want to make sure that your bank isn't funding nuclear weapons. Check that, don'tbangonthebomb.com, and you can call your bank and be like, why are you investing in weapons producers? I'm a doctor. That's going to go poorly. I don't want you doing that. stop it.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful. That's a good one for us to put down.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Wow. Very heavy.
Yeah.
Very a lot to think about, Erin. So just to lighten this up
Yes. Go ahead.
so what are you reading these days? Are you listening to certain podcasts that are really stimulating you, getting those vibes moving, right? Like what's
Well, I mean, it is June 3rd, so I am stuck in the middle of the 2 seasons of Bridgerton, which is obviously not weapons related at all. And just before we got started, we were discussing everyone's failure to get Taylor Swift tickets.
Yes.
But I mean, to bring it back a little bit, there are actually a couple books you could read. And I only literally have children's books. But if you want to learn more about sort of fictional landmine situations, we have Secrets of the Fire, which is written about a landmine survivor in Mozambique. And then this is actually one of my teacher friends told me I had to read it because she knows what I do. It's the Breadwinner trilogy. It's the second one.
Yes.
Called Parvana's Journey, and it talks about well, actually you can see the landmine survivor boy on the cover. So yeah, if you want, and they're children's books, so they are, you know, they deal with heavy things, but they're a little bit lighter. But on the lighter side of things, I mean, remember these are issues we're winning on. So even though it sounds dark and heavy, we're actually making an impact. For example, Sri Lanka will probably be landmine free by the end of next year.
That's fantastic.
Like, that's awesome. There's going to be a global meeting on the treaty in Cambodia in November, and it's in Siem Reap. And part of it is like, we have to go to Angkor Wat because the Angkor Wat whole tourist temple complex was mined at one point, and now it's completely safe for all of us to go and see this wonder of the world. So it might be a tough topic sometimes, but there are great people working on it and making huge progress.
And
So
making the world a little bit safer.
yeah,
And actually advocating that this not continue. That
exactly.
right, that we stop this type of destruction.
Yeah.
And that in itself is so very important. I can't thank you enough, Erin, for this phenomenal discussion. I'm sure that others may have some questions, and I see Karen's on board. Is it time for questions and answers?
After we've finished the recording.
Wonderful.
I will take this opportunity to say that I am sure that I am speaking for everyone who is participating tonight and who will be watching in on the recording in wanting to extend a huge thank you to both of you for being able to have this fireside chat and allow us this opportunity to learn just a little bit more about what you do and what MAC does. You've given us a lot to think about and a lot of some amazing resources. I heard monitor.org, International Physicians for Prevention of Nuclear War. I heard that you have a link to a Washington trauma care physician who's doing research for low resource locations on how to deal with trauma that might be open to students. I heard that you have potential of research programs also on blast injuries for children. We had two children's books that from looking at them, these aren't children's books. They look like things adults could read as well. They look more like teen books if I'm seeing them.
Yeah.
And you gave us all kinds of other things to start thinking about. Humanity and Inclusion as a charity. I have to say I'd never heard of it. So it'll be, again, those kind of things on my list to learn more. And don'tbankonthebomb.com. So you've given us a whole pile of resources of where to go to learn more about these programs. So thank you. Mission achieved.
Absolutely.
I also want to take this opportunity to just do a quick shout out for someone who's been behind the camera, our amazing Women, Peace and Security Network Canada coordinator, Monique. I don't know if Monique wants to come onto camera or to acknowledge our thanks for everything that she does. Anything you had wanted to say?
No, I want to say, that was a wonderful discussion and it was really interesting. And I will just add that Humanity and Inclusion is actually also a network member. So.
Yeah.
I see
Only in the last year or so.
Sure.
So you're forgiven for not being aware of that.
Well, thank you for educating us once more. And thank you again for your time and efforts in supporting us to make these possible and to get them up on the websites.
Yeah.
So as we do officially come to a close, I'm hoping everyone who's listening in here is a bit wiser now about the Federation of Medical Women, Women, Peace and Security, Women, Peace and Security Network, and in specific, our highlight organization for tonight, Minds Action Canada. I do hope everyone listening will consider joining us again for our next quarterly one and learn more about new issues. So for those that are with us right now live, please stay on. We will be finishing off the recording, and that's the perk of coming live. You will all be able to ask your own questions of Erin Hunt. And with that, a farewell to our next fireside chat. It's a wrap. Thank you.
Bye.